Welcome movie lovers from far and wide. Today I delve into my favourite genre as I review Insidious: The Last Key. Insidious: The Last Key, also known as Insidious Chapter 4, is a 2018 American supernatural horror film directed by Adam Robitel and written by Leigh Whannell. It is the fourth installment in the Insidious franchise and the second in terms of the series' chronological order. It follows parapsychologist Elise Rayner as she investigates a haunting in her childhood home. Going into this, I wasn't sure what to expect. I certainly hadn't heard anything good from other cinema goers, but to my pleasant surprise, I enjoyed this installment in the Insidious franchise. Now that's not to say it isn't without its problems, but for the most part I feel I got what I wanted out of it, and that's cause for celebration. While it seems unnecessary to have made a sequel to the prequel, as it just continues to make the timeline of these movies exhausting to follow, I do appreciate that this time around it gives us more of a background on Elise. We learn more about her upbringing, and while it is always interesting to learn these things about a character, I do feel in this case it is a little contradictory to the Elise we see in the first film. In the first film, Elise is confident in her abilities. She doesn't appear to scare easily, as she is very comfortable with her gift and the field in which she works. There is also a better rapport with her sidekicks. They understand how she operates and they work in sync with that quite well. In the third film, we see how the three met and began working together, but it feels as though these things should have happened in an earlier period, only due to the fact as they have their routine far more down pat in the first chapter, which would indicate having worked together for a longer period of time. In Chapter 3, we see Elise widowed and living in fear of her gift and the things that are not of this world, but eventually she gets back on the horse. This seems to conflict with Chapter 2, which depicts a young Elise who is very confident, secure, and capable with her abilities. Now add in Chapter 4, it seems that Elise's personality is just a tad all over the map. If you follow the timeline, Elise grew up as a very powerful psychic but was abused for her gifts as well as targeted by other entities until running away from home. Somehow she grows to be a young woman who is confident and uses her gifts very openly to help others. At some point after the death of her husband, it suddenly becomes too much and she becomes a recluse hiding from her abilities until she is forced out of retirement. After this, she gets back to work but is still highly traumatized, and then enters the events of the first film where she is miraculously no longer traumatized and is as capable as she was in her 20s. That is one hell of a roller coaster ride for one person. But what I make out of that is Elise in Chapter 1 and 2 does not sync up with Elise in Chapters 3 and 4. Despite these, what I would call discrepancies, I highly enjoyed Lin Shaye's performance. I've never been able to get enough of her role as Elise, or any other horror movie role for that fact. She's able to convey vulnerability, strength, honesty, fear, and compassion in her character, and I love that. It makes her character very enjoyable to watch, even if some things don't add up. I have always loved how these films tie into one another. There's something very exciting about watching them all link up or give reference to each other, but again, I didn't feel they sold me on this very well. While I do think the ending was the best attempt at tying Chapter 4 into Chapter 1 by showing Elise having a vision of Dalton just before receiving a call asking for her help. The scene where Elise is in the further and enters the attic where Dalton is, I thought was pushing it. For two reasons. One, you're essentially saying it was Elise's fault that a demon went after Dalton because she left the door open. Except in the first film it's established that Dalton had seen this demon before when astral projecting. It just happened that in his last astral projection his soul was captured. But now we're saying the demon entered due to a mistake of Elise's. This makes no sense. It also makes no sense to use this sequence when in Chapter 3 the red-faced demon makes an appearance at the end of that film there too. The plot itself isn't terrible, but it is poorly executed. I find its biggest problem was trying to do too much, which then prevented it from giving 100% consistency to any of the established plots. We understand the demon in this film is very personal to Elise. They really could have delved into that a great deal more. We know the demon wants to use Elise's abilities to allow itself to move around more, but then we're also told it's basically turning people into serial killers. These two plots clash very strongly, but at the same time aren't fleshed out enough. I would have preferred they pick one of these and focus on it more. The demon in question does not appear for quite a while. Prior to this, we've seen ghosts, and while we understand how the ghosts tie into the demon, they weren't tied in well, and for most of the movie also seem to be conflicting. Again, this is simply evidence of trying to do too much. I still don't know the whys behind this being. Now that seems like a lot of negative responses to a film I enjoyed. It is possible to enjoy a film and point out where it has flaws, so let's see what it did right. Establishing Elise's past and giving her a connection to the demon in question is definitely a pro. We learn more about a character we've seen for 4 movies now, and instead of the villain being a random entity, it has a personal connection to the lead character. Those elements work. Introducing us to Elise's family, seeing her reconnect with them, and introducing that she has a niece who inherited her psychic ability is also great. It means from this point on, the franchise can focus on the present timeline post Chapter 2 instead of continuing with prequels, and they can do so without it meaning we never see Elise again. After all, she was dead in Chapter 2 and we still saw her plenty. We do see some growth in our sidekicks, and we perhaps can see how they've gone from amateur to conducting themselves slightly more professionally with Elise's guidance, though I don't think the growth from Chapter 4 to Chapter 1 in terms of timeline work. My favourite aspect of this movie was the jump scares. Now, I saw a lot of people complain that that is all this film was. Well, yes, it contains a great many of them, but they were effective and done properly. They definitely used the old school technique of do the same trick and repetition so they don't know which moment will be the moment. It's an oldie but a goodie, and I love the classics. I'm an avid horror fan and horror movie watcher, probably watching around 300 horror movies a year, and a great many of these claim to be filled with suspense, jump scares, and things to make your adrenaline go wild, and I can say with confidence, not a single one has done so successfully in a very long time. In those movies, the jump scares are non-existent, the suspense is not suspenseful, and really, at most, they just throw a lot of gore on the screen and think that equals a successful horror film, and it doesn't. If you are a horror film and you don't make me jump once or make me excited, nervous with anticipation, then you have failed as a horror film. You could have a great plot, but if you don't scare me, you have failed. So even if you have a bad plot or one too many errors, if you were able to make me jump, especially multiple times, then you are a successful horror movie in my eyes. So for me, this was a success. This is not the best supernatural horror film I have ever seen, and I certainly can list the issues it has all day long, including the fact the rules or elements of the further get more and more foggy as these movies go on, but at the end of the day, I just don't care. I found some good plot points I enjoyed, some human storylines to appreciate, good performances, and a plethora of effective jump scares that make up for all the jump scares I didn't get in the last year. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. The love is always appreciated. And if you're not already, please hit that subscribe button and become a frequent visitor of my channel. I hope to see you around. Until next time, bye.
Oh, tiptoe by the garden, of the willow tree, come tiptoe through the tulips.